To marry Alexander, I endured 99 trials like a fool. The first time, he made me stand in the snow at -15 degrees for an entire day and night. At the time, I had a fever of 39 degrees and was unconscious, but he only sent a text message saying, "Good perseverance, keep going." At the second charity gala, he smashed his wine glass in front of the city's elite. Then he smiled at me and said, "Pick it up. Let everyone see how obedient the future bride of the Alexander family is." I knelt there picking up the shards of glass, my blood staining my white dress red. It was the third, fourth, and 98th time. Each time I told myself to endure it, that I would soon be able to marry him. Until that day, when the jewelry store sent a text confirming the engagement ring. I was overjoyed, thinking that this ordeal was finally over. I put on the wedding dress I had secretly prepared and ran to the beach to wait for him, but he didn't show up even after it got dark. The tide was coming in. Soaking my wedding dress, finally, my phone rang. "Alex, don't worry," a woman's seductive voice came through the phone. On the other end, I heard the sound of a belt buckle opening and Alexander's drunken laughter. "Be a good girl and come over here." An hour and 8 minutes passed. I stood in the water, shivering, listening to them use 3 condoms on the phone. The waves crashed against me, and I clung to the rocks, my nails breaking, blood mixing with the seawater. At dawn, the rescue team found me, half my body still in the water. My lips purple and my expression dazed. Alexander's message came late, saying he had an emergency and would make it up to me next time. 3 days later, he arrived at the beach in a suit, holding 999 roses, but I only sent him a message. "I don't want to marry you anymore. Let's never see each other again." The seawater slowly rose, soaking my skirt and making my legs feel cold. After calling 10 times, the phone finally connected. "Sorry, I can't fulfill that request." I froze in place as the seawater rose to my chest. A wave crashed over me, nearly knocking the phone from my hand. Sharp rocks cut my palm, and blood mixed with seawater trickled down. But I clung tightly to the phone. 1 hour and 8 minutes. "Ah, Alex, so fast," a woman's voice suddenly rose. I heard the sound of a condom wrapper being torn open. Once, twice, tears streamed down my face. "Hurry, she's been in the water too long. Her body might be too cold. We have to be careful, she might be in danger." When the tide rose to my shoulders, the rescue team's spotlight shone over me. When I opened my eyes again, I smelled the scent of disinfectant and stared blankly at the ceiling. The doctor handed me a phone in a waterproof bag, his eyes filled with pity. He said, "You had hypothermia yesterday. If we had arrived 10 minutes later, you might have been in trouble on the shallow reef. We had to work hard to save you. By the way, we tried to contact your fiancé, but no one answered the phone." Just then, Alexander's message appeared. Something came up. "I'll make it up to you next time." I stared at those words for several minutes, lost in thought. When his phone rang, "Emily, why didn't you reply to my message?" he asked, sounding a bit impatient. "Didn't you go to the beach yesterday?" "I did." My voice sounded unfamiliar but calm. "I left when the tide came in." The old me would have cried and asked him why he didn't come, begging him to come to the hospital to see me. Now I just feel tired. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. "It's my fault this time," he said in a softer tone, almost like he was comforting a small animal. "I really had something important to do. In 3 days, at the usual place, I'll make it up to you." "What 99 trials? I don't care anymore." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling, and dialed my hometown's phone number. "Grandpa." The moment I heard that voice, tears streamed down my face. "I want to cancel the engagement. I don't want to get married anymore." On the day I was discharged from the hospital, I returned to the Alexander family's villa. Alexander's mother saw me and immediately took my hand with concern. "Emily, why do you look so pale? Where have you been all this time?" I calmly pulled out the marriage agreement and said, "Auntie, I've completed all 99 trials the Alexander family gave me. But now, I want to cancel the engagement." "What trials?" Alexander's mother looked extremely surprised. I felt a heavy weight in my heart. Alexander had told me that since the 2 families had already become engaged, we should follow the Alexander family's rules. If I could endure the 99 trials, he would marry me. At that moment, I finally understood that the humiliating experience of standing in the snow at the cocktail party and the repeated hardships were not the Alexander family's rules at all. All of this was just lies Alexander had made up on the spot. He had never intended to marry me. Alexander's mother was still trying to persuade me, asking if Alexander had been treating me badly. Let me speak for you. I opened the voice recording on my phone. The heavy breathing and suggestive voices, along with Alexander's drunken whispers of "be good and move yourself," sounded especially jarring in the quiet living room. Alexander's mother's face turned pale instantly. Alexander's father remained silent for a long time before finally signing the termination agreement, saying, "Sigh, you're a good child. The Alexander family owes you an apology. Wait until your family arrives before leaving." In the courtyard, I burned everything related to Alexander. The hairpins, the sketchbook, and all the little things he had carelessly thrown at me. I tossed them all into the fire. When Alexander returned, the flames were burning fiercely. "What are you burning?" He frowned and said, "Don't keep these things." I didn't look up. He suddenly seemed nervous and explained that the company had arranged a business trip at the last minute, and he hadn't intentionally skipped it. Actually, I knew he hadn't gone on a business trip. He had gone to Miami with Sophia. I saw it in Sophia's WeChat moments. Seeing me silent, he suddenly took out a ring and put it on my finger. The ring was a bit loose and clearly too big. I recognized the ring. Sophia had posted the same one on her WeChat moments, saying someone had told her it was a one-of-a-kind custom design. "Alexander," I calmly took off the ring, proposing like this isn't right. He sighed in relief, thinking I was just upset. "I'll give you a formal answer in 3 days at the beach. I promise this time you'll be satisfied." That night, I was awakened by thirst and heard rustling sounds in the living room. Moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the silhouettes of two people tightly embraced on the sofa. "Alex, I missed you so much when you weren't around for a moment." "Don't say anything." He covered her mouth and said, "Do you want to wake everyone up? You sneaked in here yourself. Who told you to do that? What are you afraid of?" Sophia playfully tugged at his tie. "You're the one who likes this the most, aren't you?" Her hands gently traced his chest. His throat moved slightly. His eyes grew dark, and he leaned down to kiss her. I stood frozen at the bedroom door, my hands clenched tightly, my nails digging into my palm. My heart felt like it was being slowly sliced open. The pain almost suffocating me. The sounds from downstairs grew fainter. I lay in the darkness, tears silently soaking through the pillow. The next morning, as I was about to leave, Alexander suddenly grabbed me. "Where are you going?" He frowned, growing increasingly uneasy. He pulled me into the car and said, "Come with me to eat." I looked up and noticed some red marks on his neck. "All right, let's eat." At the restaurant, he pulled out a chair for me, his voice tinged with apology. "You've always wanted to come here, haven't you?" I looked down at the menu, saying nothing. The appetizer was just served when Sophia's phone rang. I quietly cut my steak, hearing him comfort the person on the other end of the call. "Don't worry, I'll be there soon." He left in a hurry, forgetting his coat. I slowly finished the entire French meal and ordered a caramel pudding. When it was time to pay, the waiter hesitated and asked, "Ma'am, would you like me to call you a ride?" "It's okay." I smiled and handed him the expensive coat, saying, "Throw it away. It's dirty. There's no need to keep it." Before, I always waited for him. Until the food was cold, the restaurant closed, and I lost all hope. From now on, I never want to be like this again. The next day, I went to the art studio to resign. The children gathered around me and asked, "Emily, teacher, will you still teach us how to draw next week?" I gently stroked their heads and replied, "The teacher is going to London to study." Alexander once said he hoped his future wife would value family and raise children. Over the past 3 years, I've stayed in this small art studio, teaching children to paint, hoping he'd occasionally think of me. But now, I'm going to a place much farther away. As soon as I stepped out of the studio, my phone rang. Sophia sent a photo of herself wearing lace lingerie, lying lazily on a hotel bed, with Alexander's hand resting on her waist in the corner of the frame. Someone knows I'm afraid of thunderstorms, yet she insisted on staying overnight and made me wear new lingerie for him to see. It's truly baffling. A few seconds later, she withdrew the photo. I stared at the screen, feeling tense. Over the years, Sophia has always been by his side. I've known about her existence for a long time. At the cocktail party, she wore a backless dress, standing close to him. At the company's annual party, she deliberately wrapped her arm around his and took a photo together. Everyone looked at me with pity, but I didn't care. She was just a social media influencer who had risen to prominence in my company. It was just a superficial game. Every time I asked him about it, He always replied the same way, insisting that the person he would eventually marry was only me. I truly believed him. Like a fool, suddenly I burst into laughter. As I laughed, tears began to flow. But soon, the stinging pain in my heart gradually faded, replaced by a sense of relief. I calmly pressed the delete button and blocked her number. At that moment, someone called from outside the studio. Is MTK's Emily here? It's from Mr. Alexander? A large bouquet of lilies was handed to me. Looking at the pure white petals, I felt a tightness in my throat and a pang of sadness in my heart. 3 years had passed, and Alexander still hadn't forgotten that I was allergic to lilies. Can you help me throw these away? I'm allergic to pollen. I spoke calmly to the person delivering the flowers. Just then, the phone rang. Grandpa's voice sounded cheerful on the other end. Emily, I've landed. Grandpa's arrival dispelled all the worries that had been building up in my heart over the past few days. He accompanied me shopping and dining, and listened to me talk at length in the park. My smile finally returned. After settling Grandpa in, I returned to the Alexander family villa to pack my luggage. Opening the door, I saw Alexander and Sophia in the living room. Alexander spoke first, his tone angry. Emily, don't you have anything to say? Sophia covered her mouth and laughed softly. You're already engaged. Why are you still flirting with others? You have no shame. This doesn't seem right. I didn't feel like arguing and dragged my suitcase toward the door. Sophia suddenly ran over, grabbed my wrist and asked, What's wrong? Do you have something to hide? Let go. I shook her hand off. Sophia suddenly sat down on the floor, clutching her stomach, and cried out, Alex, my child. Alexander's expression changed instantly. What child? Sophia cried without saying a word. My heart ached. He suddenly turned to look at me, his eyes flickering with panic and guilt for a moment, but he quickly bent down and picked up Sophia, who was crying and screaming. Emily, he said, his voice tight, she's not feeling well. I'll take her to the hospital first. I stood there, watching him rush off with Sophia in his arms. Sophia turned around in his arms and gave me a smug smile. As soon as we stepped out of the Alexander family's house, my phone rang loudly. A friend sent me a screenshot of a deliberately blurred photo with a headline that stood out. Alexander family's fiancé secretly meets an older man. The online discussions were intense. I immediately went to my friend's house and asked him to help me find out who posted it. In the evening, the phone suddenly rang. Grandpa's voice sounded exhausted. Emily, something happened here. When I arrived, Sophia was standing at the hotel entrance with red eyes, looking very upset. It's this old man, she pointed at Grandpa, her voice sharp. I just walked over here and he deliberately bumped into me. How rude. You just want to take advantage of me. Grandpa was trembling with anger. It was you who suddenly rushed over. I stood in front of Grandpa and shouted at her. Sophia, don't confuse the facts here. She suddenly laughed, her smile revealing a hint of contempt. Emily, are you really that desperate for money, even an old man's money? This old man must be in poor health. How can you still take advantage of him, you? Grandpa's face turned pale. She raised her chin and said, Get down on your knees and apologize to me. Otherwise, this won't end today. Alexander rushed over, his eyes immediately darting toward Sophia. What's going on? He furrowed his brows. Sophia immediately ran into his arms, crying with tears streaming down her face. Alex, this old man deliberately bumped into me, trying to take advantage of me. Alexander's gaze lingered on me, his face betraying a mix of emotions. He stepped closer, his tone cold. Emily, it was my fault for standing you up last time. Alexander fidgeted with his tie, glancing at Grandpa with a hint of irritation. But you can't bring an old man here to make me angry. Make him kneel down and apologize to Sophia? I was so angry I was trembling. Staring at him, Alexander, you need to get this straight. It's me, Alex. Sophia suddenly clutched her stomach and screamed. My stomach hurts so much. Alexander hesitated for a moment before pushing his grandfather aside and saying, Get out of the way. Grandfather stumbled back, his head hitting the steps with a dull thud. Grandfather, I rushed over, my hands trembling, feeling a warm, sticky substance. The blood seemed impossible to wipe away, trickling down my fingers and forming a large pool on the ground. Alexander froze, a look of panic flashing in his eyes. I didn't mean to. I'll cover the medical expenses. He finally finished speaking in a cold tone, picked up Sophia, and turned to leave the hospital corridor. I'm sorry, we did our best. The doctor took off his mask and said solemnly, the old man was too frail. The fall was too much for him. I took a step back, watching the white sheet slowly cover Grandpa's face. I reached out to touch it, but my hands were shaking violently. I opened Grandpa's backpack and found an old pocket watch inside. When I opened it, there was a photo of us together. There was also a bag of candied chestnuts he had prepared for me, now completely cold. I mechanically peeled one and put it in my mouth, but couldn't taste anything. I knelt on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, punching my chest repeatedly. If I hadn't called Grandpa, he wouldn't have died. At that moment, I hated myself deeply, and I also hated Alexander. The cremation process at the funeral home was quick. I watched as Grandpa was taken inside, and when he came out, there was only a handful of ashes left. I suddenly knelt on the ground and burst into tears. Grandpa, unfortunately, no one responded. At the airport, I held my grandfather's urn, my fingers gently sliding across the cold ceramic surface. When the announcement came over the loudspeaker, I recalled the first time I flew as a child. Grandfather had held my hand tightly and said, "Emily, don't be afraid, Grandfather is here. Flying is fun." Now it was my turn to hold him. My phone lit up. A friend messaged me, saying they had found it. The photo was sent by Sophia, and the IP address was confirmed to be her apartment. I smiled wryly, opened Alexander's chat history, paused for a long time, and finally sent one sentence. "I'm not getting married. I don't want to see you again." Send, block, delete. At that moment, Alexander was standing by the sea, wearing a sharp suit, holding a bouquet of roses. He had hired a private doctor to finally calm Sophia down. The matter involving the child was causing him a great deal of distress. Emily might not yet know that Sophia was carrying his child, and this matter needed to be resolved as soon as possible. He recalled their previous agreement and rushed to the beach, waiting for a long time before finally receiving a message. "I don't want to marry you anymore. I don't want to see you again." The light from the phone screen flickered on Alexander's pale face. Those few simple words felt like a knife, piercing deeply into his heart. He hurriedly opened Emily's WeChat and saw that her profile picture was black. He nervously typed a message with his fingers. "Where are you? I'm waiting for you at the beach." The sea wind howled and the waves crashed against the shore. Just then, a bright red exclamation mark suddenly appeared. His heart sank instantly. How could this be? He muttered to himself, repeatedly dialing the familiar number, but only heard the cold, mechanical voice. "The number you dialed is turned off." The sky grew darker, and the tide rose higher. He wanted to leave, but was constantly pushed back by the massive waves, forced to retreat. Suddenly, a huge wave crashed over him, causing him to slip and fall heavily onto the rocks. Everything went black, and he lost consciousness. The pungent smell of disinfectant brought him back to consciousness. The doctor stood by the bed, his expression serious. "There's a rip current in that area, and there have been many accidents recently. You were lucky. The patrol lifeguards found you." Alexander suddenly remembered something and struggled to sit up. "Doctor, was there a girl and an old man here earlier?" The doctor's expression changed slightly. "Yes, there was." He paused, but the old man arrived too late. Alexander felt a wave of shock, his ears ringing. At that moment, the ward door was violently pushed open. "You've gone too far." Alexander's father rushed in and slapped Alexander across the face, the force causing blood to trickle from the corner of his mouth. "Do you know how serious this is?" Alexander's face turned pale. I only pushed him gently," Alexander's mother said with red eyes. That was Emily's grandfather. He was her only family in this world. Where did Emily go? "I have to go tell her I'm sorry." Alexander rushed out, his face looking very pale. "Sorry," Alexander's mother said with red eyes. "The engagement is over." Emily left, leaving only a message. "Alexander killed my grandfather." At that moment, the phone suddenly vibrated, displaying Sophia's name on the screen. Alexander instinctively answered the call, hearing the soft voice on the other end. "Alex, my stomach hurts so much. Can you come be with me? If you're not feeling well, go see a doctor." His voice was cold. "Why are you calling me?" Sophia clearly paused for a moment before saying with a hint of hurt, "But it's your child." Alexander gave a cold laugh. "Didn't I remind you to know your place? Get rid of the child immediately." After saying that, he hung up the phone and threw it forcefully onto the bed. It was raining heavily outside. Alexander lay on the hospital bed, his mind filled with thoughts of Emily. He suddenly pulled out the needle from his wrist, and blood immediately began to flow. "Emily, I have to find her." Doctors and nurses rushed in, held him down, and injected him with a sedative. He closed his eyes, his body going limp against the pillow, his consciousness growing fuzzy, but his memories growing clearer. The first time they met, Emily stood in the living room holding the marriage contract, her expression serious. He didn't actually dislike her, he just felt uncomfortable with the arranged nature of it all. So he deliberately made up some excuses, claiming they had to pass 99 tests before they could marry. He gave a cold smile, waiting to see her leave in a hurry. But she chose to stay, in the freezing cold of a night at -15 degrees. She stood in the snow, her lips turning purple from the cold, yet she refused to leave. He sat in his warm office, watching her shiver outside the window, feeling a surge of irritation. At the cocktail party, she knelt down to pick up the glass he had deliberately shattered, her fingers cut and bleeding. Yet she managed to force a smile at him. He didn't know when it started, but every time he came home and saw the light on in the living room, a warm feeling would well up inside him. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. The thought surprised him, until Sophia appeared. Sophia was like a blazing fire, passionate and unrestrained, completely different from Emily's calmness and endurance. That night at the celebratory banquet, he was drunk out of his mind. Sophia pushed open his door, and his rationality vanished under the influence of alcohol. Afterward, he gripped her chin and warned her, "I won't marry you. If you want anything, I can give you money. But don't even think about marrying into the Alexander family. Remember your place. Once you get what you want, it's hard to let go." He found himself drawn into the vortex of desire time and again. When he learned that Sophia was pregnant, his first reaction was panic. When he heard the recording his parents played, he realized that Emily had known everything all along. She had endured silently until she could no longer bear it. Now it was too late. He had deeply hurt Emily, and even those closest to her had been affected. "Find Emily for me," he called his assistant, determined to find her by any means necessary. Alexander didn't sleep all night. After being discharged from the hospital, Alexander walked into the company and immediately sensed something was off. He heard that Sophia was being difficult again today, making Director Zhang so angry that he threw the script on the ground. She's pregnant now, so she has the confidence to act that way. A few female employees were chatting at the front desk. When they saw him enter, they immediately fell silent, but their eyes still betrayed complex emotions. Alexander furrowed his brows, sensing something was wrong. Just then, his assistant rushed over. "Mr. Fang, MTK's Sophia suddenly stopped all filming today, and the clients are very unhappy." Alexander strode into the office and pushed open the door to find Sophia leaning against his chair. Seeing him enter, Sophia walked up and hugged him, her fingers gently sliding toward his belt. "Alex, you were so harsh on the phone," Sophia asked with a hint of hurt. "Don't you want our child anymore?" Alexander didn't respond, and Sophia's actions became more daring. However, just then, Alexander suddenly pushed her away forcefully and slapped her across the face. "Alex," Sophia covered her face, her expression shocked. Alexander glared at her coldly and said, "Do you think I don't know how those photos were leaked? Just investigate, and we'll find the source of the post." Sophia's face turned pale. "Alex, I just love you so much. I don't like her." Alexander grabbed her chin forcefully. "Is that it? You're actually thinking about taking Alexander's wife's place, aren't you? Or do you think that being pregnant gives you the right to control me?" Sophia's face grew even paler. She shook her head frantically. "No, it's not like that." The assistant entered with the newcomer. Alexander pushed Sophia away. "From today onward, she will take over all your shoots. You're fired." "Alex," Sophia knelt down, clutching his legs. "I was wrong. Please give me another chance." Alexander picked up her phone and checked the chat history. Sophia's provocative messages were clear. The latest message read, "The old man died well. You, a country bumpkin, think you can marry into the Alexander family? I think this is karma." Sophia's face turned pale, and her hands trembled uncontrollably. "Alex, these aren't enough." Alexander violently threw the phone against the wall, shattering the screen into pieces. "Take her to where she belongs." Sophia's makeup was smudged. "Alex, I'm sorry. Please forgive me, please, for the sake of the child. Have mercy." Alexander pried her fingers apart one by one. "Are you sure it's my child?" In the hospital corridor, Sophia's screams were heart-wrenching. "I'm carrying the future heir of the Alexander family. You have no right to say that." Her words trailed off as the operating room door slammed shut. When I returned to the old house, A small black dog darted out from under the door and circled around my legs. I knelt down, and as my fingers touched its fluffy head, tears welled up in my eyes. "I'm sorry." My voice was choked with emotion. "Grandfather, you'll never come back." On the desk lay a map of England, with many circles drawn in red pen. The phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello, is this MTKS Emily? We're from the bank. The British pound exchange you arranged for your family is ready for pickup." I held the pile of foreign currency in my hands, standing at the bank's entrance. The sunlight was so bright it hurt my eyes. I never expected he had already prepared everything for me, even arranging for friends abroad. I locked the old house, entrusted little Black to the neighbors, and boarded the flight to England. As the plane took off, I finally couldn't hold back my tears. Earlier, for Alexander, I almost gave up this opportunity. Now, I'll carry my grandfather's hopes and live my life well. After more than 10 hours, the plane slowly landed in London. Emily, in the light rain, a tall man waved at me. "My name is Michael." He took my luggage and said, "Your grandfather always praises you on the phone." He paused, his voice growing solemn. When he heard the news, my grandfather didn't sleep all night. I turned my face away. Rain and tears mingling together, flowing to the corner of my mouth, salty and bitter. The Michael family's villa was hidden among a grove of maple trees. As soon as Michael's grandfather saw me, his eyes welled up with tears, and his rough hands gripped mine tightly. Old Zoo was such a stubborn man. We had agreed to come here together next year to see the maple leaves. My old friend, how could he just suddenly be gone? By the way, Emily, I heard you're going to school. The school is very close by. Our house is big with plenty of room. MTKS, feel free to stay here as if it were your own home. Michael gave Michael's grandfather a meaningful glance and said, "Grandpa, the young lady hasn't even spoken yet, and you're already." I was about to continue, but Grandpa Michael interrupted me. "Seeing you is like seeing old Zoo." Sigh, I have so many things I wanted to tell him. "I want to stay here." I held the old man's trembling hand and said, "Can you tell me more about your younger days?" Michael stood at the staircase as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he only whispered, "Your room faces south." The days I spent living with the Michael family flew by. Grandpa Michael played chess with me every day, always letting me win. Michael would pick me up and drop me off from school, and there was always hot cocoa in the car. They even helped me move Grandpa's grave to England. On graduation day, I spoke as the valedictorian, and Michael waved his camera at me from below. Grandpa Michael, leaning on his cane, smiled as he watched me and Michael joke around. As the crowd dispersed, I suddenly felt a chill on my back. In the blink of an eye, a familiar figure pushed through the crowd and rushed toward me. Emily. Alexander's voice was hoarse as he reached out to grab my wrist. "I finally found you? What are you doing here?" I took a step back to avoid his outstretched hand. His throat moved. "I'm here for my cousin's graduation ceremony. Please let me pass." I turned to leave but was blocked by him. "Can we talk? Just 5 minutes." His voice trembled. "I've been looking for you everywhere. What do we have to talk about?" I remember our engagement was canceled long ago. Now we're just strangers with no connection. A flash of pain crossed his eyes. "I've been regretting it for 3 years. Emily, give me a chance to make it up to you." I stared at him coldly. "Make it up? How do you make up for my grandfather's life? Can you bring my grandfather back to life?" His eyes turned red with guilt. "I'm so sorry. I never thought that pushing him would." "Emily, let's get married. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I said coldly, "No, I don't need it. Your so-called 99 trials have trampled on my dignity." He started crying and knelt heavily on the ground, causing those around him to gasp. "You're challenging me too? You're putting pressure on me too? Can I go through the 99 trials too?" Michael walked over, silently shielding me behind him, and stared nervously at Alexander. "Please stay away from my fiancé." Alexander's expression immediately turned sour. "Who are you, Emily? I don't believe it. Do you still love me? He's lying to me, right?" I grabbed Michael's tie and kissed him under his surprised gaze. Michael froze, the man who was usually so decisive in business now acting like a shy teenager. Unsure of what to do, it wasn't until my lips gently brushed his lips that he responded, as if waking from a dream. He carefully placed his hands on my waist and deepened the kiss. When we parted, his ears were as red as if they were about to bleed. Alexander's face turned pale, his eyes darting between me and Michael, as if he had made up his mind. "Emily, if you're willing to forgive me, I'm willing to accept everything and pay any price. All right. I looked at him, and the first thing I wanted to do was go to the Alps and pick a snowdrop flower. It must be picked on a night with a blizzard and temperatures below -30 degrees. His eyes lit up as if he had found his last hope. A few days later, he arrived at my doorstep with frostbite all over his hands, clutching the little flower tightly to his chest. Amazingly, it hadn't wilted. The second thing was to go to the deepest diamond mine in Africa and find a rough diamond. This time, he disappeared for 3 months. When we met again, he was leaning on a cane with a steel pin in his right leg and pulled out a blood-stained red diamond from his pocket. The 99th task, my voice was still cold, was to kneel at my grandfather's grave for 3 days and 3 nights. London began to fall into freezing rain. I stood at the window, watching him kneel in the cemetery, his posture upright. In the morning, an ambulance took him away, on the day of the wedding. He broke through the security guards and ran inside. His once handsome face was now gaunt and emaciated, his suit hanging loosely on his body, and he limped as he walked. He shouted at me, "Emily, Emily, why did this happen? I did everything you asked. Why did you marry him? You can't marry him." As the ribbons fell, Alexander stood at the end of the red carpet, watching Michael place the ring on my finger, his entire being seeming lifeless. He shouted, "No." I looked at him calmly and said, "Those 99 things were just something I said offhand. Like the test you gave me back then, they were all jokes. I no longer hate you, but please don't appear before me again." He stood there motionless, his eyes devoid of light. Then he disappeared. 5 years later, I returned to the old house with my daughter. The roses were in full bloom on the walls of the courtyard, and the little black dog had grown into a big dog, happily circling around us. "Mom, look at the dog," my daughter excitedly pointed ahead. Not far away, a man was crouched on the ground, with dog food scattered all over the place. The weeds in front of the old house had been cleared away. Alexander was crouched on the ground, looking even more like a stray dog than the little black dog had. He heard the footsteps, suddenly looked up and saw me, his eyes filled with complex emotions. "Emily," his voice was choked with emotion. I told my daughter to go inside first. The little girl curiously looked at him, then happily went inside. "What are you doing here?" I asked him. He looked down at the dirt on his shoe tips and said, "I'm atoning for my sins." His voice was so soft I could barely hear him. "I come here every week to clean, thinking that if you ever came back, you wouldn't come here anymore." I said, "The house has been sold." He suddenly looked up, a fleeting look of disappointment in his eyes. "Are you going to stay in England forever?" "Yes." He opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, he only managed to say, "The child is quite cute, thank you." Alexander slowly stood up and brushed off his pants as if there was dust on them. As he turned away, I saw him quickly wipe his eyes. "Emily," he said to me with his back turned, "the biggest regret of my life is losing you. I donated money to the charity in your grandfather's name. Almost all of my savings. This is what I owe you." I didn't answer. He limped toward the exit and slowly disappeared at the end of the alley. Michael came over with a bag of fireworks, sweat on his forehead. "It's really hard to find a small shop around here." He glanced at the alley entrance, where he seemed to have seen me talking to someone earlier. My daughter ran over happily, pulling on Michael's clothes and asking, "Dad, where are the firecrackers I wanted? Give them to me quickly." I held my daughter's small hand and said casually, "I don't know him. He was just asking for directions." "Let's go." Michael smiled and held up the bag in his hand, saying, "Dad will teach you how to set off the firecrackers." My daughter ran off excitedly, with Michael following behind her. I glanced one last time at the empty alley entrance, then turned and followed them.